I'm so pleased to be here tonight. I'll tell you that my presentation is nothing like it was supposed to be a week ago. And in fact, it changed even today. So we'll see how it goes. I want to start with a couple of things tonight. And let's see if I can make sure I know how to do this. The power of civic engagement. Let's start here. A story that I read not too long ago about our really crummy economy and how bad things were. As I continued to read, it said, you know, the interesting thing about our crummy economy is that there's less waste in our landfills. And I thought, well, no, there's something interesting. So because we have a crummy economy, people aren't buying as much stuff, they're not throwing away as much stuff, and so there's not as much stuff going into landfills, which means that the communities actually get some sort of a benefit by not having to invest in waste. Wow, maybe our crummy economy's not so bad after all. Maybe there's a different way of looking at things so that we can suggest that the circumstances that we're currently in may have some sort of a benefit. The other thing I wanted to talk about, the other quote I wanted to talk about is by Harry Truman. There's nothing new in this world except for the history that you don't know. How these two things relate actually makes a lot of sense to me. I hope it'll make sense to you. There are all of these things in the world that we think we have knowledge of, or that there's nothing in the history, that nothing in the world, nothing new in the world except the history that we don't know. We sometimes think that we have all the answers, and we forget that we have a precedent in history. We forget that there are these things that have existed in our communities or existed in our lives that can actually be beneficial. So what I'm trying to do with these two quotes is to say we need to look at things in a different way, but not so much that we think that they're always brand new, but to remember that there might be a history, there might be a precedent that would be worth us looking into. Now, how does this relate to human potential? I contend that our circumstances really aren't that bad, and that in fact, all of our communities, every single one of them, has within it already everything that we need to be successful. Everything. I read a book not too long ago. See, I forgot to change my slide. I'm not really good at PowerPoint. I read a book not too long ago called by Kretzmann and McKnight called Building Communities from the Inside Out. It was written in 1993, which is one of those things where you might say there's some history there. Some people might think 1993 is really old, and some of us might think it was yesterday. I'm one of the ones who thinks it was yesterday. But nevertheless, Building Communities from the Inside Out, the premise behind this book was that our economies are crummy. Things are falling apart. This was in 1993. Things are falling apart. Our social ties are weak. Our economies are weak. Government spending is drying up. What are we going to do? So Kretzmann and McKnight said, you know, what we're going to do is we're going to go into the community and we're going to realize that the assets that we need in our communities to solve community problems are actually within the people that are already there. So they developed this thing called asset-based community development. Pretty interesting idea. So from that, I thought, this is back when I was working at Habitat for Humanity. And we thought, you know, we want to do a program called something along the lines of building more than houses, because we all know Habitat for Humanity as a program that builds low-income and affordable housing. So we're saying, you know, what we want to do is to empower our homeowners to live beyond what they think they can do. These are folks that have been downtrodden and been in places and never believed that they would actually own a home. So I created a program. It was a nine-week series of art empowerment. The whole idea behind that was to get people to see their creativity, to understand that everyone is creative, and by unlocking that creative process, you empower people, and they see their opportunities. They see that they can do things outside the box. So I developed 9 different workshops. What I want to talk about today is the one called Mosaics, the value of each piece. Probably one of the most powerful workshops I've ever seen happen. And what it was about was identifying the assets of our homeowners. It worked like this. You sit around a table, and you have volunteers. And you have volunteers from every part of the community that come in. They agree to take part in this workshop with our homeowners. So you've got people of all ages, of all races, both gender, you name it. We're all around the table. And we say, what do you like to do? What do you do well? What assets do you bring to the community? And they say, I don't know. Well, let's just list something. What do you do well? Well, I cook for my church. Oh, you cook for your church? Yes, I cook for my church every Sunday. And I think, heck, I can't even cook for my husband. Jeez, he knows this. Please, come on, cook. So I said, well, how big is your congregation? About 100. You cook for your congregation every Sunday for 100 people? Yeah. You don't think that's an asset? No, just cooking. I said, holy cow. I said, that's a big deal. So you can think about, okay, well, gosh, if you're cooking for 100 people, if you want to think about what opportunities that might be, it could be a catering business. Think about how that might translate into something different if you wanted to do something differently in your life. So we'd continue to go around and around and around, asking everybody what they did well. It might be that I'm teaching my parents the internet. It might be that I'm a nurse. It might be that I just am a passionate speaker. You name it. It was the gamut of things. So what we did was we had all these tiles. We said, really these tiles sometimes represent what we feel like in the community in terms of what our assets really are, about how we really feel appreciated. I said, when you put all those pieces, those broken pieces together, you start to realize how beautiful something can be. So what we did is everyone took a broken tile, and they wrote their asset on the back of that tile, and they put it somewhere on that mirror. And as we put it on the mirror, we listed all of the assets that were there. And at the end of the workshop, as we taught to tile and grout, which is also a skill that we were doing, we said, let's read all of the assets that we have. Let's read all of the things that exist just in this room. And every single time I did this workshop, mouths dropped open. They couldn't believe it, because every single time within the room was every single asset, every skill that was needed to make change in their community. And they said, who knew? So the value of this workshop was to say, look, you can make change. You can do whatever you want in your community. Let's identify your capacity, and let's show you how to make it happen. This isn't a new idea. I didn't really make it up. I took it from Kretzmann and McKnight, because that's what they did, asset-based community development. So I suggest that we all learn to do that we all figure out how to get into our communities and help people to see their capacity, to help people see that regardless of what you do or what you think you do, you bring something very, very, very important. And when we were to bring people together in a room, we would realize just how much creativity and just how much power we have to make huge change. We don't necessarily need government funding. Sure we do, a little bit, but we could raise the money here. We have a project in the community, we have something going on, you figure out who can do what. You can make that happen. The neat thing about this project was that after we did our community project, each of our homeowners would do one of their own to represent the skill that they had, the asset that they bring to the table, so that they would have a visual representation, a reminder every day, you bring value, you have an asset, you can change community. The one on the left, top left, was a woman who had this amazing passion for the environment, and she wanted to study the ocean, and she loved the idea of protecting the natural world. That's a big deal. We need people like that in our community. The person on the right just loved horses, just wanted to work with horses, just had a passion for working with animals and with horses, and so forth. The stories were absolutely amazing. This job that I had in this program was probably the best job I ever had in my life. It was one of those things where you left crying at the end of every workshop because it was so powerful, because you could see how it was affecting people, because you gave them that gift of understanding their capacity. So like I said, what do you do? What happens? What happens when you really can help people see what they do in the community and how they can make change? If you can really convince people of that, then they get involved. And this notion of apathy and apathetic community people or apathetic voters goes away, because all of a sudden you've given me the gift that I'm important and I matter and I can make change. So they get involved in projects like Knox County One Question. I'm going to brag on Knoxville and some of the great projects to let you know about some of the things that we've done here as community members that didn't take government funding. Knox County One Question was 2007. Patrick was on that steering committee. Am I correct? We had a unique opportunity to change government. The way that our charter government was set up suggested that the people could change it to make it better if they wanted to. And a decision from the state Supreme Court said, indeed you can. So a steering committee was put together. They started just dreaming up these ideas of how to make this thing happen. So they put together a plan. We had a public idea gathering session. From those 5 community meetings and some online comments, we developed 4 different themes of how our government might change, how we'd like to see our government be better. And then got the Seven Islands Foundation to fund some best practices research, and that's how actually I got involved and was contracted to work with the Howard Baker Center for Public Policy to do best practices research. If these are the areas that Knoxvillians are most interested in terms of shaping government so that we have a citizen-driven government, what's going on around the country that can help us understand that? So I got the luxury of traveling across the country and looking at sister cities of similar size, looking at the best practices in county government. We brought that back, wrote a report, gave it to the steering committee. Those became recommendations for charter amendments. And what's the rest of the story? Anybody know? We changed our county government. And you guys did it. The citizens did it. People who cared, who believed that they can make change, got involved, changed the way we do business in the Knox County government. That's big. That's a big deal. The next project, Compassion Knoxville. We're all familiar with the tenure plan, what happened in Knoxville with the tenure plan. Great idea, lots of really great things happening. Got a little controversial, hit a brick wall, stopped moving, and then all of a sudden we've got an issue of how do we deal with homelessness in Knoxville? We can't do nothing. So what happened? The 2 mayors said, we need to move this forward. We need more public input. The public needs to tell us how we can move forward. The public needs to tell us how are we going to figure out how we deal with homelessness in Knoxville. So that put together a task force that was led by both sides of the spectrum, 21-person task force. They hired Gianni Longo to help create a process. They hired me to oversee the process. We did 43 community meetings in 6 weeks, got into every zip code, I'm going to say every zip code, almost every zip code in Knox County, and asked for people's input. What should we do? From that, we created 6 themes, 44 recommendations, put them in a nice report, and gave it to our leaders and said, this is how the community will support homelessness. These are the kinds of things we would like to see to do, we'd like to see the community to do. So that gives us a way of moving forward. So when the government comes back and says, these are the things we're going to do, the community can say, yes, I support that, because I was part of the process. I was part of making those recommendations and part of that solution. And I'll do my next little plug. Envision Knoxville. I've got the pleasure of working with Alex Lavage on this project. Another project that is funded by, and I should have mentioned that the Compassion Knoxville, we'll just back up for a second. Compassion Knoxville, when you look at who funded that, it was funded by the community, literally. So the budget that we had came from Mercy Hospital, it came from the faith-based community, it came from United Way, it came from everybody. So the community funded the project because they said, we want community-based solutions. So they funded a project that allowed us to move forward. This is a similar project. Cornerstone Foundation is funding this. And this one is, again, one of those things where we're asking the question, how do you empower young people? How do you get people excited about the future of Knoxville, about how to reach its greatest potential? So we're doing a survey, and it's been out for a little while. And the way that it's working is that we're asking people to fill out a survey, give us some basic ideas, and then the second step is on Mind Mixer. And Mind Mixer allows us to have a much more specific dialogue. So we're working on that. The Mind Mixer part will launch pretty soon. These are examples of how it is, the power of civic engagement, about how people can get involved, why they should get involved. We need to think differently about who should be solving community issues and community problems. It's not going to be local government. It's not going to be state government, and it's not going to be federal government. It's going to be the people in this room. It's going to be the people in East Knoxville and South Knoxville and North Knoxville and West Knoxville. It's going to be the people that live here and live in the communities. So the challenge is to get into those communities and find ways of identifying capacity. How do you get people to understand the value that they're bringing? How do you get them to go back, if I'll go back to my slide, how do you get them to create a community mirror? How do you get them to create the reflection of their community that says, you've got it all right here? So in the work that I'm doing as I've continued to move forward out of my role at the Baker Center is to do that. And so I'm dedicating my next step to trying to figure out how that happens. Because it's not that difficult. I did it. I did it in a room of Habitat for Humanity homeowners and a bunch of other volunteers. And it was really powerful. So I leave you with that, the challenge to get into your communities, to remind people that they're valuable, to ask them questions, ask them what they like to do, and help them see how they can help our communities. Thank you for your time and allowing me to be here.